Remember Rush Limbaugh? He used to be the person who reliably made the most outrageous and indefensible public comments on the right wing of American politics until Donald Trump came along. And now it's impossible for Rush Limbaugh to stir controversy in a country with a president who makes Rush Limbaugh seem shy. Rush Limbaugh was never the leader of his radio audience. He was always their follower, which he proved when he changed so many of his policy positions and his public positions on morality to become a Trump supporter and a half step after his audience became Trump supporters. And yesterday, Rush Limbaugh offered yet another public surrender to Trumpism. It came in the middle of a phone call on his show from Douglas in San Diego, who was urging Republicans to nominate, quote, a young, potentially two-term president, one that believes in fiscal conservatism. Douglas pointed out, in 2019, there's going to be a $1 trillion deficit. Trump doesn't really care about that. He's not really a fiscal conservative. To which Rush Limbaugh actually said, nobody is a fiscal conservative anymore. All this talk about concern for the deficit and the budget has been bogus for as long as it's been around. Rush Limbaugh didn't offer any hint that he was aware that he was confessing to his own bogosity in attacking every Democratic president over the size of the national debt. So it is with Republicans now. They defend things they used to attack. They attack things they used to defend. They impeached President Clinton for behavior that President Trump has outdone. Republicans say nothing about Donald Trump being, in effect, an unindicted co-conspirator in the Southern District of New York, where federal prosecutors say that he committed federal crimes with Michael Cohen and directed Michael Cohen to help him commit those crimes to win the presidency. And the Republicans who impeached Bill Clinton say there's nothing wrong with that, and there's nothing wrong with his conduct as president. The current chairman of the Senate Judiciary Committee, who was one of the prosecutors of Bill Clinton in the Senate impeachment trial, now says there is nothing in Donald Trump's conduct as a presidential candidate, allegedly committing crimes to get elected, or in his conduct as president that is worthy of even a single congressional hearing. Conservative columnist George Will, who left the Republican Party when Donald Trump won the Republican nomination, is worried about what the Trump presidency means for our future. Here's what he had to say about that in an interview with the New York Times Book Review podcast.
I believe that what this president has done to our culture, to our civic discourse, you cannot unring these bells, and you cannot unsay what he has said, and you cannot change that he has now, in a very short time, made it seem normal for schoolboy taunts and obvious lies to be spun out in a constant stream. I think this will do more lasting damage than Richard Nixon's surreptitious burglaries did.
Pulitzer Prize-winning columnist George Will joins us after this final break. Michigan Congressman Justin Amash left the Republican Party 2 weeks ago and is now an independent. Yesterday, he voted with the Democrats in the House to condemn what President Trump said about 4 Democratic members of the House of Representatives. And he tweeted this: if you're a Republican, please ask yourself if the party really represents your principles and values. You don't need to become a Democrat. Simply stand up for what is right. America's tradition of liberty is beautiful, and it depends on our love and respect for one another. Joining our discussion now is George F. Will, Pulitzer Prize-winning syndicated columnist for The Washington Post and the author of the new book, The Conservative Sensibility. He is also an MSNBC political analyst. George, I want to get your reaction to something that Lindsey Graham just said tonight on Fox News about President Trump. He said, from a Republican view, you don't have a lot to complain about. So I guess Republicans no longer have anything to complain about in the national debt or a $1 trillion deficit or tariffs, and the list goes on.
Well, that's the but Gorsuch argument, that he may be coarsening, he may lie all the time, he may discredit the United States at home and abroad, but Gorsuch. There are very few Republicans who seem to have really drunk the Kool-Aid, that is, to mean what they say. I'd say Mike Pence and Lindsey Graham are the two. The others are, I think, without any affection or respect for the president, which makes what they do in a way worse, because what they're doing is saying it's all because we're invertebrate and completely terrified that we're doing this.
George, your point about how this presidency could be more damaging than the Nixon presidency was. Please expand on that.
Well, Nixon's burglaries were surreptitious. That is, they were done in private. They were hidden because they were against the norms that were not challenged by Nixon. He evaded them but didn't challenge them. He didn't refute them. He didn't degrade them. Donald Trump says, and to be fair to Mr. Trump, he's fulfilling a campaign promise. He promised to overturn the norms, and he's doing so. When a president goes overseas and quotes, he was actually misquoting, but that's par for the course, but when he purports to quote the dictator of North Korea, describing a former vice president of the United States, Joe Biden, as a low IQ idiot, and approves this, that takes him into a realm no president ever before has ventured into.
And you believe that this is a behavior that will be imitated post-Trump?
Well, you can't unring the bells. You can't unsay what he is saying. And it's amazing to me how fast, and we saw this in the 20th century in a number of ways, how fast something could go from unthinkable to thinkable to action. And it doesn't seem to me it's going to be easy to just snap back as though this didn't happen. It happened, and he got away with it, and he became president. And there will be emulators.
I want to get to the specific point of the fiscal conservatism and Rush Limbaugh saying, oh, no one ever believed that, which I personally don't believe. When I was working in the Senate, I believed that the Republicans across the aisle and Democrats actually meant what they were saying about the deficit and the debt. But politically, it's very difficult to wrestle with. And in your new book, The Conservative Sensibility, you quote my old boss, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, talking about that phrase he used, civic religion, about minimalist government, and you put it that it is avowed but not constraining, this civic religion. It's one thing to aspire to a certain value in politics and then fail to achieve it. It's something else to say, oh, no, we never meant that. We don't care about that anymore. Yeah. That's what Rush Limbaugh is saying.
Yeah, Pat said that the talk about balanced budgets was like Soviet grain total quotas, that no one believed them, even in the Soviet Union. I think it's possible, Lawrence, that the political class is more united by self-interest than it is divided by ideology, and the self-interest is that it's in everyone's self-interest to give the American people $1 worth of government, charge them 80 cents for it. It pleases the public. You shift 20%, 25% or 20% of the government off onto future generations that are unconsenting because they're unborn, and we go merrily along. We're about to run $1 trillion deficit at more than full employment, at reasonably steady economic growth. What is going to happen, Lawrence, when the next recession starts at $1 trillion deficit?
And what is going to happen to Republican politics post-Trump? If a Democrat is sworn in on the next inauguration day, will Republicans in the Congress immediately return to deficit concerns?
Well, it's going to be interesting. What are the evangelicals who have worshipped at the golden calf of Donald Trump going to say? Are they going to snap back into saying character matters in politics? I don't think so. The laugh test will be, they will flunk. Republicans, having given us their first $1 trillion deficit, again, in good economic conditions, can they just snap back? I don't know. You know, Gene McCarthy, late senator from Massachusetts, ran for president in 1968, the hero of your fine book on 1968. Gene McCarthy once said that the Washington epistemology is this: anything said 3 times becomes a fact.
Yes. And
the Republicans now will say, as the Democrats are guilty in their own way, they'll say something 3 times and decide that it's a fact.
George, the video replay will show that you slipped Massachusetts instead of Minnesota, which I know you meant for Gene McCarthy. And I just want to correct it here because I know you'd want us to. And
I'll say it 3 times and make it a fact.
There you go. That's the way to do it. George F. Will gets tonight's last word. Thank you for joining us, George. Really appreciate it. Thanks for checking out our YouTube channel. Subscribe by clicking on the button below for more from The Last Word and the rest of MSNBC.